Which one do you want? This one? This one.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the September 16th West Fargo City Commission meeting. I'd ask that everybody in the room, with the exception of emergency personnel, please silence your cell phones. With that, would you please join the commission in a pledge of allegiance? Thank you. Madam Secretary, would you please call a roll?
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Here.
Commissioner Sundell?
Here.
Commissioner Jarvis?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here. The record show all commissioners are present. Item D is to approve the order of the agenda. Commissioners, it has been presented. It is in your packet.
So moved.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve the agenda as presented. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as distributed. Is there any comments, discussion?
We had a question on the bills for the city of Fargo and
Commissioner Jorgensen, please.
the clarification for what I think it was how it was coded.
Yep. Mr. Scott, on page
18 of the bills.
18 of the bills, with regard to some of the expenses that the city of West Fargo incurs with the city of Fargo, they have addresses, and if we could have a delineation, if it's sewer, water, whatever the case might be, the addresses will save everybody a lot of time, whether it's the public reviewing them or commissioners reviewing them. Just specifically, the addresses is meaningless to anybody and everyone. If you would, please.
Sure. Yep, I will
Thank you.
certainly work with
Commissioner,
finance.
that's acceptable?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Scott, it's on actually page 9 of the bills.
Yep.
It just lists the addresses, so it was kind of gray what they were for.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item E is to approve the minutes of September 3rd, 2024. They are in your packet.
Make a motion to approve?
Thank you, Commissioner Zundel. I have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Jorgensen seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of September 3rd, 2024 as presented. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item F is the building permits. Again, they are in your packet and have been distributed.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson, I have a motion and a second to approve the building permits as distributed for September 16th. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is a consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we have items A through F.
I have
Commissioner Jorgensen, you have a question?
yes, on consent item agenda number C.
Item C, okay?
It involves the river setback. Do we have the verbiage in there, like we discussed about 2 months ago, that the developer must stake it out to clarify that it is within or without the river setback is correct?
Yeah, I can respond to that if you'd like. So the verbiage.
Excuse me, Mr. Aaron Nelson, Planning Director for the City of West Fargo is responding. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. So we do have the language that's included in the packet there is kind of carry forward language from when the original subdivision was originally platted. And so we're just recognizing that that language doesn't change. It carries forward with basically just a replatting of the configurations of the lot lines. But since the previous conversation that you referenced, we have had internal conversations between planning, building inspections, and engineering. And so anytime we have a permit along the river, we do coordinate with the engineering department to make sure that we're, in cases where the building is, within close to that line, we will be proactively sending somebody out to make sure that it's properly staked. So it's some internal changes, but nothing that's reflected in what you see in the packet.
Okay. Okay, thank you, because what we went through before, we're moving forward.
Consent agenda items is an actionable item, Commissioners.
Move to approve.
Commissioner Zundell moves to approve. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda, items A through F as distributed. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. We are now on the regular agenda. First item on the regular agenda is public comment. Members of the public will be allowed 2 minutes and 30 seconds to address the City Commission. These are, this part of the public comment is the one that is, the public signs up for. Madam Secretary, could you share with us what we have for this evening?
I just have one, and it looks like it's Keith Stroh.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Keith Stroh, are you in the room? You have an opportunity to speak regarding the issue that you sent us. Please come forward. Good evening and welcome.
Hi. I just feel,
Please state your name again and the address for the recording and for the watching public. Thank you.
Keith Stroh, 425 South Pond Court East, West Fargo, in the preserve.
Please continue.
All right. So my taxes have increased pretty much every single year. We've lived in that house. The house we lived in before was kind of the same situation. My biggest question is, when is enough for us? I am now on Social Security because I'm old, but you know, the taxes keep going up. They go up because the evaluation's going up. And I don't think there's a single thing I can do about this, other than just tell you that I'm not happy with it. I don't quite understand why we have to raise every year. I do understand how prices increase. I've been in the automotive business for 40 years. In fact, I work with Dan, and good guy, by the way. But I just wanted to say that because between the specials and the taxes, it's pretty tough. Not everybody makes the kind of money some people make. That's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Stroh. We only had the one item to sign up for this part of the public comment. All right. Item number 1, the public comment is now closed. We move on to item number 2, which is a public hearing on the preliminary budget.
That's what I came in.
Wait.
That's what I came in for, what he's talking about.
All right, sir. You're welcome to speak on item number 2 if you'd like.
Well, mine went up 487%, which I think is completely wrong. There's no sewer,
Sir,
no water,
sir.
nothing up by me.
Sir, if you'd like to address the city, wait till item number 2, please. Thank you. We're going to call on Mr. Scott, City Administrator, for the opening comments regarding the preliminary budget.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis, and Commissioners. So as you're aware, tonight's hearing is specifically to receive any objections and protests on the preliminary budget that was approved on August 5th. Once you've had an opportunity to hear all the protests and objections, the Commission can have some additional discussion, either give feedback or direction to staff, and then we will prepare a draft final budget for our special meeting on September 23rd. So again, tonight's purpose is specifically to hear the protests and objections on the preliminary budget, and again, give any additional direction to staff. There are a number of changes that we've already been making to the preliminary budget. I touched on some of those during our last meeting. I'll just reiterate them again. We are moving forward with a 0 mil increase. We have made significant itemized reductions, and proposing uses of other funds to balance the budget. As of right now, it looks like we'll be able to balance the budget without asking for additional reserves or again, raising the mills. But again, final details and more information will be provided on September 23rd. So with that, any questions before you open up the?
Commissioners, any additional questions for Mr. Scott before we start? Mr. Anderson?
Just for clarification, the zero mil increase, that include the 4% COLA that was discussed during preliminary budget? Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Commissioner Jorgensen?
And that was with acceptance of the proposed increase in rates of water, sewer, and garbage and forestry.
That's correct, yes.
Those revenues are included in the preliminary budget.
Yep. Yep. So again, everything that was approved on August 5th is still in there. Yes.
Anything additional for Mr. Scott? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
At this time, we are no longer in the regular agenda, and we move to the public hearing on the preliminary budget. Madam Secretary, did we have people sign in or anything like that, or are we just going to, all right, very good. So we're going to accept comments on the budget, on the preliminary budget that we have. So if you'd raise your hands or who are here to speak to that. I know that the gentleman with the sunglasses on the top of his head, he was the first one in the room this evening, so I'm going to call on him. And then I'm going to call on the gentleman that, can I call you with the suspenders? But you're first, if you'd come forward. State your name and address, please, and what your concern is. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Muhammad Ahmed, and I live in 2082 11th Street, West Fargo. There's a lot on my head, so I don't know if I can put it all here. But as a resident, in general, I do not object any development of the city.
Lean into the microphone, please. Thank you, sir.
As a resident of West Fargo, I do not object any development for the city. But yet, we have an expression says that if your mattress is not along, you don't have the ability to have a long mattress, just spread your leg as you have. Now, development, yes, needed a lot of budget to do it. But again, yet, city of Fargo, residents of West Fargo are very few. And there's some of them moving in. But since I see this budget or this increase of taxes, I don't think that's a good policy to encourage residents to come into West Fargo. In matter of fact, it's discouraging people to come to West Fargo. Why do I say that? Last year, my taxes from last year to this year went up 90%, almost 100%.
Excuse me, sir. The purpose of this hearing is to talk about the budget. If you're here to talk about the taxes, we do not deal with that at this point in time.
Well, the budget is...
If you're going to talk specifically, if you're going to offer some suggestions of where the cuts could be, that's great. That's fine.
I will.
That's what we're here for.
Yes, I will. The budget is included the taxes you guys raised, right?
All right?
Okay. Now, you raise the taxes 100% for residents, just the property tax. So, in my case, I'm going to be paying $6,000 as a tax. That's mean increasing my mortgage by $600 a month. Plus the utility. There is increase of 2% of the electrical toward the city of the gross amount of the electrical usages, 2%. Now my bills, or my utility bills, went from 100 to up to 170, almost 75% increase. Come to the water. Last year I paid 100. Today I pay 125. That's 25% increase for a resident like us. This increase of taxes here is going to be the higher taxes in the region. And I don't think the resident will afford to do that. Myself, I cannot afford to do that. So please revise your budget and make it easier for us so we can help. And that's all I can say right now.
Very good, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Gentlemen, right here.
Name's Roger Ellingson, I'm 1001 10th Avenue Northeast, West Fargo here. I've been out there 40 years, and the only thing that's gone up is my taxes. Now I see you got, school taxes went up, what the hell is it here? According to the projected change is $1,320. That's a pretty big jump out, that's a pretty big jump, I would say. And the total here is 400 and, what is it, 400 and, I don't know, the guy must have been on drugs or something. 418.68% is what they're talking for a total jump in taxes here on everything.
Sir, just again to clarify, that statement comes from the county, not from the city of West Fargo. The increases with the school district, we have no control over. We have no control whatsoever.
Well,
I understand your frustration, but we need to talk on the budget. And if you have some...
well, isn't this part of the budget?
It is part of the budget as far as how we forecast the revenues. But when it comes to when you talk about your assessments, okay, that's mandatory by North Dakota state statute. And I'm not going to address this with every gentleman. You're one of the early ones. The assessment requirement is 90 to 95% of market value. Okay?
Well,
we track all of the sales that take place on commercial and/or residential property.
well, I've got a commercial property.
Okay.
And that's my residence too. I've been there 40 years. You guys have never made one improvement on my property since you brought me into the city. That's another big problem I have with you people. There's no sewer, no water. It cost me $27,000 on assessments out there for 12th Avenue, which doesn't even connect to my place. I have a problem with all of this stuff. And I brought it up a couple of times, and it seems like I can't get nothing done. I don't know anything but, you know.
Please, Mr. Jorgensen.
So I completely understand what you're talking about, and my property went up significantly last year. I was in your spot before I was in this spot. I addressed the city council, and just last meeting, I also addressed our assessing department. There's a process to go through. If you go to the assessor and allow them to come onto your property, they will reassess your property, walk through it, you let them inside your buildings, and there's meetings in, I was told, like March and April, that they will come to an agreement, or you'll have your chance to speak there. That's when it'll be true and decided. The letter you're holding, I mean, everybody got that letter.
I know they did.
Yeah, so that was projected on our budget with the 2 mil increase. We're below that 2 mil increase. We're not gonna use that, more than likely. So
I know it's projected,
I'm
just projected. It's nothing set in stone, but.
Well, and this is where the city gets thrown under the bus a lot of the time, of your tax statement or proposed tax statement there. The city's only you're asking for 20-some%. The schools are 40-some, the park district's there. And I question the verbiage that's on that you're allowed to come to this meeting. Not saying it's right or wrong. It doesn't give you the actual information, but that's what's required by law to be on that statement. So I would direct you to go get a hold of the assessing department, have a conversation with them, set up an appointment, let them come to your place, you walk them through it. Everything has three values, right? What you think it's worth, what I think it's worth, and what it's actually worth. So I would direct you to do that, and then go to the county meetings.
Well, I'm not much for meetings, but
Well, but you definitely took your time to come out here and hear your voice heard, and we appreciate that as a city commission. So,
well, I got
We're-
some
we're
friends that
direct-
want,
we're
one other
directing you-
friend that wanted to be here too, but he said he had to work tonight, so.
well, completely understandable, but we're gonna try to help direct you in the right way or direction. So, I mean, that's the starting point.
Okay. Well, I got mine taken care of, and the best I can, I guess.
But please proceed with it.
So.
I
Okay.
mean, your voice was heard.
And if you need some more direction as to how to navigate that, we'd be happy to help. Absolutely happy to help.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. If I could have a show of hands of who else would like to speak, so I can, the gentleman in the orange shirt, the gentleman in the orange shirt in the back. Thank you, sir. You've been here quite a while too, so we're gonna put you to the front of
Takes
the
as long as it takes. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice.
Um,
Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. On the general budget, the summary
Please
is,
state your name and.
oh, I'm sorry, Peter Hetwer, 1610 Maple Place, West Fargo, North Dakota.
Thank you.
Okay. The general budget thing is, the bottom line budget is too high. It goes up every year. When I looked at the taxes, like they're all talking about, which are a function of the budget, increase, which everybody got. Then you look at the relative amounts. What's the highest one? Is county conservation was 62%, but that went up from $9 to $15, so that's kind of a misnomer there. But the highest of school, county, everything is city of West Fargo. And that's in spite of the sales tax increase, where they got an extra 0.5% for police and fire, right? So the budget still went up. So where can we address this? One is, and I come every several years and mention it, property tax exemptions. The city this year did about 5.5 million in property tax exemptions. And when I checked way back when somebody showed me the document, it was 5.5, so I went back about 3 years this time. It seems to be 5.5 million every year. The city gets about 26%. The school district gets about 46%. So the school district is missing $1.25 million. The city is missing $1 million, or I'm sorry, whatever, 25%, $1 million, right? So that's money you could get if you didn't give them the exemption and come to the rest of us for our money to pay their fair share. That's not right. And the argument is the big three, the 800-pound gorillas, when you look at the document that somebody in the city prepared, very good document, are residential, pilot, and TIF. And pilot, you're giving somebody money to help get jobs, and to me, that's just a big fallacy. If they want to do business in West Fargo, they should pay their fair share. An example is my understanding when Menards came, they didn't ask for specials, and look how many jobs they brought. The TIF, the same thing is, oh, it's going to increase the value, and then we're going to use that money to pay for the things. So let's say you improve the sewer, and it costs $1 million. You're going to get that money from the rest of us. Here, give us each $50 so we can pay this $1 million so that it goes up in value, and we're going to capture that money and pay back the $1 million. But I never hear you guys come back and say, here's your $50 back. You just use it somewhere else. So, and in the meantime, that captured money back is not for fire, police, etc. You're still cutting that money from us. So property tax exemptions, $5.5 million on the table that you could get back. Not saying all of it, but it's just wrong. Another one is how to save money. I'm thinking, if I think of something, somebody else has thought of it. Has the city of Fargo, West Fargo, ever thought about merging with the city of Fargo? Now, how much money could we save? The money saved would not be in police, you need the same amount, it wouldn't be in fire, it would be in administrative. So you combine these, and just look at how much money. Every time I look on the West Fargo website, there's another layer of administration. So if you merge that, how many millions would be? And you say, well, no, when I first came to West Fargo, I've been here 30 plus years, it was a small community, whatever, but we are becoming Fargo. How can you say we're not? Our wells went away to Fargo Water. Our sewer went away to Fargo Sewer. Our garbage went away to Fargo Garbage. They used to pick up stuff beside the garbage, and they don't anymore because that's what Fargo does. So we are Fargo. We're using all their services, so how about we just get rid of the duplicate administration and we save a lot of money? Just a thought of a way to save money. One more thing that I don't see is debates. A lot of times with the commissioners, what I like to see in Fargo is sometimes there's a 3-2 vote, and I'm going, yes, because there's actually a debate on the issue as opposed to everybody agrees on everything, and I'm going, that's just rubber stamp. My brother had a friend that ran for city commission. He was going to get in there and he was going to change stuff. He got elected, he got in there, he told my brother I was afraid to vote against anything once he got in there. So my point is, please do not be afraid to challenge the departments. My last comment is, there's no competition in the city or in the library or in the parks. If you guys need more, if they need more money, you're our representatives. You're supposed to rein them in. They just ask for more money and you increase our property values or increase our taxes. It's the same difference. You can say a 0 mill levy, but if you increase my property 10%, my taxes went up 10%. Potato, potato. So watch what they ask for. An analogy would be, do you remember, some of you guys are old enough, back in AT&T, it used to cost 30 cents a minute to call Bismarck. Then they broke them up and it was 6 cents. Now it's free. Why? Because of competition. In government, there is no competition. I brought up the property tax exemption to the school district, which you pointed out is a big part of the budget. I brought it up to the park district, and they go, well, the city sets it. And I go, yes, but if you're leaving money on the table too, you could get that money. And they don't care because they just can just raise the taxes. They don't have to fight for the money. They can just take it just by raising the property value or the tax. There's no incentive to do anything extra to save us money. It's sad. So anyway, and one last example that I thought was humorous when I saw this in the paper, and usually I do not look for stuff because if you see something, then you have to do something about it. So ignorance is bliss. As you get older, you find it. You don't want to see it. But when I saw the announcement in this paper, and I don't read it at night because sometimes you see stuff you don't want to see, but on the front it talks about this, you know, the budget. And I appreciated you mentioning that if they put more money in savings, I like that. That's what I like to see. But on the back, it talks about the new library bus, right? And my wife pointed out, I think somebody donated. I'm going, thank you. We didn't need the 40,000. But then I looked on here. We are excited to keep the mission alive. We are expanding the services to seniors, daycares, and greater West Fargo community. And my point there is, it looks like people in city government are looking ways to spend more money. The city should be doing the things that need large sums of money for our common purpose. Water, sewer, garbage, police, fire, not look for ways. Well, we need to go drive this bus around to visit more, like a daycare, like they can't buy their own books. To me, it's like make work. Last comment, I went to the park district once, and while I was waiting, there was somebody up there doing a presentation that was there, and her comment was, the project they were looking at, this park is gonna be bigger and better than anything Fargo has. And I'm thinking, really? We're competing with a city 4 times our size for the Joneses, And the idea is to look for more ways to spend more of our money that's not necessary. We just want to live in our homes and have the common stuff. We don't need all the, if we want to have money for the desserts, let us spend it, as opposed to, here's a dessert we bought for you, pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, could I have a show of hands of anybody else that would like to speak? Okay. We have one gentleman with his hand up. Please join us.
Good evening. Steve Marquardt, 725 15th Avenue East. Lived there for a long time. As we start this here, bottom line is, and Peter, I know him, I used to teach at the high school. His kids are in my class, so I know who he is. We've talked before. We're starting to look at what amount of money we're spending. And sooner or later, you're taking it from the taxpayers. And as we get old, I'm an old guy, and I used to refer to people as old. Well, I'm one of those old guys now, okay? I'm on Social Security, my choice, because I wanted to be, I get old, so you can take it up. With that in mind, as we look at things, there was just an article on Money Watch that said, generous benefits plans leading government employees to nearly 40% more than expensive, 40% more expensive than the private sector, largely due to the benefits they receive. That is a concern. The average citizen does not receive those things. And that's very true right here in West Fargo. You can call it what you want. You can call it a bonus, you can call it a benefit, right on down the line, okay? In 2020, in the city of West Fargo, the average salary was $52,276. With benefits, it was $71,421. Okay? In 2024, and these are numbers that were provided to us, by the way, from the city of West Fargo. In 2024, the average salary in West Fargo is $71,746. With benefits, it's $102,710. That's average. I don't know how many people have got that kind of increase, 37.25% since 2020. Okay, that's number one. Okay, according to calculations, homes since 2019 in West Fargo have had an average increase of 7.4% per year. Okay, that's 6 years. I taught social studies, but I'm pretty damn good in math as well. However, you put that in, we're talking about 44%. It's interesting that salaries have risen about 44% in 6 years. It's interesting, very interesting. Peter Hedward just mentioned about how we should do things with the TIFs and the tax abatements. People move to West Fargo because they want to come here. There is not a lot of land left in West Fargo. TIFs, tax abatements, they don't need to be given. Eliminate them. Bring that money here. Each year, those TIFs go away. There's more money coming in. We never hear about that. Where is that money coming from? Okay, that's where things are beginning, and people are upset about it. I mean, I'm part of a group called TAP. You know what? When I first got into it, I'm like, these guys are kind of radical. And then, of course, I became one of the radical guys. I'm like, wait a minute, we're not radical. We're just trying to help. Because people are telling us stuff. City staff. I know a guy on city staff that said, you know what? There are people that get an automatic increase every year. 3, 4, 5% that don't deserve it. There is no way, there is no performance review. They can do a terrible job and they're still getting a raise. This is somebody from the city of West Fargo. They've been there. 95% of the people in West Fargo right now, the employees in West Fargo, and it's somewhere in the vicinity, of 312 to 320 people, okay? 95% of the people are getting a 5% step increase. 5%. COLA is expected to be 2.6 or 2.7. Now, the city is also saying, we're giving a 5% increase, plus we're gonna give you a 4% increase. How do we justify a 9% raise when most people are not getting that? That's something you people have to realize. It's tough choices. I don't think anyone's jumping to get out of West Fargo. Mr. Anvig said that they're paying $35 an hour for the sanitation department because they have a CDL. You know what? I just saw an ad in the paper that said we're paying $26 to $27 an hour for CDL. Home every night. 401k. Once again, this wonderful benefit package we have, and I'm not against people making money, once again, I'm not, but when it's the taxpayers paying it, how many of these employees at West Fargo are homeowners in West Fargo that are actually paying the tax? That's something you need to realize as it goes along. As I mentioned, since 2019, property taxes have risen 44%. The CPI is up 20.9%. How is that even justifiable? Okay? If salaries weren't competitive, supposedly, if salaries weren't competitive, people are leaving. But in June of this year, Mr. Scott said, we did a study and we are competitive with everybody. So, one of two things. Either it's gone crazy in 3.5 months, or they didn't tell the truth at that time. And I'm not calling anybody names. I'm just trying to figure out where these things are coming into play. And everybody else as well. Okay? That's what we're here for. You guys do have a tough job, but you got to understand that as a taxpayer, you're beating people up. I've heard this from people that are saying, listen, I can't afford to stay in my home. Okay? Those are things that you guys need to realize. How do we balance it? Well, guess what? You know, either one of two things. Let's get rid of the steps, no longer a step, but we'll give a cost of living increase every year. The CPI, the COLA increase. Is that going to be 3%? Is it going to be 4%? That's what it should be. You can't say, I'm not getting a raise. Well, because you're getting full benefits, you're getting healthcare, full healthcare, which pays $14.06 an hour. They're also getting their total retirement paid for, which turns out to be about 16% of a salary. The private sector is not paying that. No one's jumping ship, guys. I'm sorry. They're not bailing out. Okay? Those are the things that are there. You got to look what's there. In 2024, the average salary in West Fargo is $34.49 an hour. That's without benefits. That's without benefits. You had the full family health care, $14. Okay? Now we're at $48. The 16%, we're about $60 an hour. Think about it. How many people are making that kind of money? If you have any questions for me, I'm willing to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Markart. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this item? Ma'am? Again, please state your name and address.
Yes, sir. My name is Heather Tulandine, Tyulandin, and I live at 2915 Blue Stem Drive, so I live in the giant Latitude 46 building. And originally I wasn't intending to say really anything, but then I was kind of listening to other people, scrolling through the budget again on my iPad, and there were just a few questions that I had, sort of general things to keep in mind. A lot of times throughout the budget in the different departments, you have either education or professional development, or even in some you have like membership line items. I think a lot of us would like to know what that's for and if that's actually being used. A lot of times education incentives or professional development incentives are great, but if they're not actually being used, then do they need to be continued? I know personally in my field, currently I work for a law firm, but my master's is in higher education. A lot of times that professional development is funded by yourself unless you're part of a specific group or some subsects of fields that have better funding. A lot of times you pay for that out of your own pocket. So I think it's interesting that the city is offering their staff in many departments these opportunities, but I'd like to know if they're actually being used and if that actually has a return on investment. And then a lot of times I see in there that you have tech fees and furniture fees. Specifically in the municipal court, there's like a $35,000 tech fee for this coming year. Are you guys upgrading things before they're needed to be upgraded? Are you upgrading it just because that's the recommended timeline? Is it actually broken down and not functioning anymore where it actually needs to be replaced? We don't always have to have the newest, fanciest technology just because that's what's available or that's what the tech experts recommend. A lot of computers and even vehicles last way past their lifetime, especially if you're maintaining them to the standard that should be met. So we need to make sure that we're not just jumping to the newest or the flashiest when we could get a lot more life out of things. And I know that those are smaller line items compared to some of these other ones, but these are these areas where you can make that noticeable difference for some families. And altogether, it does add up to be a decent amount. And then finally, I know a lot of people have kind of had this question generally of, a lot of your departments, you're asking for more staff. We're not seeing a justification being told. And I'm not saying you have to give every single reason because that's not really the general community's business down to the nitty-gritty details, but maybe a broad justification for why these departments need more staffing and why it's felt that the current staff aren't able to do what else needs to be done. Because like the gentleman before me expressed, each new staff member does come with not just a salary, but also those benefits. And then a lot of times there's needing to find them office space and update the furniture and get them new technology. And so these costs continue to build with each new staff person, but the community isn't seeing why that staff person is needed and therefore why that cost is either justified or unjustified depending on who you ask. So that's everything, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Scott, I know I saw the requests for the employees, like the justification that we saw for that. Is that something we can publish for the things we have in the budget for the new employees? Like I don't know the formal word for it, but I'm sure you know the document I'm referencing.
Yeah, we can certainly look into providing more information on that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
That information is available. Who would like to speak next? Just again, a show of hands, and I'll call on somebody. We got multiples. Sir?
Horace, 1833 Penton Street. I just stopped up to see if you guys forgot anything. It looks like we're doing pretty well, really. I don't know how I'm going to pay all this on 2.6% that I may get on Social Security, but I'll work on it. I might have to get a job. The other thing I wanted to comment on, you have a product when you sell utilities, but the franchise fee from Cass County Electric is pretty low. That's a low blow doubling that thing. I can't believe it. You guys nickel and dime your customers like that. It's unbelievable. I guess that's all I got. But
Thank you, sir. Anyone else would like to speak this evening? Simply raise your hand. Anyone else? Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the preliminary budget this evening? Forgive me, but I'm required by law to ask 3 times. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the preliminary budget this evening in this preliminary? Is there anyone else that would like to speak at this public hearing on the preliminary budget? Public hearing is closed. We move on to item number 3, approval of 2025 utility rates. We call on Mr. Matt Anvik, Director of Public Works. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners. Let's see, give me 1 second here. Tonight, a couple weeks ago, I brought the proposed utility rates and presented them then. Tonight, I'm coming back in front of you for approval of those rates. I'll kind of scroll past. We did put in our previous presentation. So if there was any questions on anything that people would be able to go back and look at. So when we get to now tonight, I just kind of want to go back over the reserve plan that we have that we're kind of following. You know, we're looking at our operating reserves that are about 2 months, 60 days, and then our debt service, rate stabilization, our capital asset, and then improvements for projects and equipment, and the emergency fund if we ever needed that. And kind of going off of this is what we found on those reserves. We were really looking at these are kind of going by that guiding principles in the financial policy, to just kind of reduce the use of special assessments. If we can build those reserves through through our rates, we'll be able to pay for some of our projects with the water and sewer funds and sanitation as well. Some other considerations that we've had since the last time that I presented this in front of you, we did update the sanitation reserve projections off the 2023 audit. Water and sewer are jointly reported, so we weren't able to really kind of break those out right away to update those numbers as well. And one thing that the audit showed, they are focused on like past years. And with these rate forecasts, we're looking at those next 5 years and where we need to be out there towards 2029. Also, we do have a water meter project that is out there and does need to get paid for. That will be paid out of water reserve. So if you look at that, I think that $10 million that we had in there, we're projected, once we pay that off, we're going to be down right about 7.7 million projected reserves at the end of 2024 once we pay that off. So with those proposed rates for water, we are proposing that we go up to $761 for a monthly fee, and that's based on a 3/4 inch meter. Varying meter sizes will change. The residential tier 1 usage is $777. Residential tier 2 is $961. For the sewer rates, we're proposing to go up to $13.50 for the base rate and $6 for the flow rate. The water and sewer rates are kind of driven by our increases that we're going to be getting from Fargo that we're anticipating for January 1. It sounds like they're going to be a 2-year rate or increase that'll be there, for 2 years, and then after the 2 years, it's a possibility of getting another raise coming from Fargo. Our sanitation rates, we're looking at $23.55 for the 64 gallon, $27 for that 96 gallon. Forest, we are increasing that up to $3 from the 2, and vector control will stay the same at 1. Just another slide here, and then just our example utility bill. If you have based on 1,000 gallons usage and a 64 gallon can, your monthly bill will go from 108 to 131, and then 4,000 gallons, you're going about 85.33 to 103.74. And with that, if it is approved tonight, we do have to I'll work with Mr. Shockley to get a resolution, and we'll have to bring that back to approve that, to get these changes through resolution. I'll stand for any questions.
Just to clarify, Mr. Anvik, on one item, you have proposed rate increases for multiple years.
Correct.
This evening, what you're asking for is very specifically for the next coming year. And then we're going to do an evaluation. Isn't that correct, Commissioner Anderson and Commissioner Jorgensen, as your understanding?
Yeah.
Both of these folks are in sewer and water portfolios.
No, I'm on the sanitation.
Well, sanitation, excuse me, and then Commissioner Zundell.
Yes.
Is that not the discussion, is that it's it's defined to the 1 year only, then we do a reassessment?
Yeah, because Commissioner Anderson and I, and Mr. Anvig and Mr. Jacobson, as far as the sanitation, we discussed having a meeting in October. I mean, we made the changes July 1st. By July 15th, we realized that we need to make more changes or adapt, and we wanted to get a historical, let it play out. But as far as the utility rates, I think we're fine on that. It's just how we're gonna do like the bulk and the pickup and stuff like that is what that meeting would be about. The rates, I think, we pretty much agreed upon.
But preliminary discussions were that when we make, that the motion should be specific for the 1 calendar year, and then it's reviewable yearly. And I think that that's critically important for the taxpayers to understand that we're not approving all of these out 5 and 6 years in advance.
Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify that.
No, thank you for that clarification, Commissioner President. And yeah, and what we did wanted to do is show that 5 years out to kind of forecast where we would need to be for those reserves to get to that point. And I guess to show the community where, you know, we are forecasting this, where we're going to kind of need to keep moving that up a little bit to just handle the inflation and to get to where we need to be. But yes, you're correct. I'm only looking for the 2025 rates to be voted on today and approved. I think the plan is to come back every year during the budget season like this to get those approved, because once we get that in there, there's some, like in sanitation, there's some efficiencies that we're looking for and some other projects that we're looking, that we can't quite put a dollar figure to it, like with our air burner and certain things like that, that we don't just know how much that is. If that starts working how we'd like to see it, we can adjust those forecasted rates and hopefully bring those down. But for right now, those are just, anything beyond 2025 is a forecast.
Correct. Very good. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Anvik? Commissioner Anderson?
I have a couple questions, then a point I'd like to bring up. I don't see anywhere in this presentation the potential increases from Fargo. Do we know what those are for water and sewer?
Yeah, I think it is on the beginning here. Top of my head. I know water was going up to, I want to say it's 471.
Go on.
From, I want to believe it's here somewhere. Yeah, it is increasing. Fargo for water is going up to 471 per 1,000 gallons. And I believe sewer is 370. 371.
Okay. I apologize, I missed those. There's a lot of text on the slides there. Another thing, one thing that really stands out to me is the sewer rate changes here. It looks like the plan, again, I know that we're not looking to increase for the full 5 years here, tonight. I get that, but it seems like we're doing a real big increase for 2025 and then doing some more slow increases, as years progress is kind of what the current plan is. I really struggle with that. I'd like to see these a little bit lower. I know that's going to have an effect on our reserves. We're not going to build up the reserves as quickly. But I think there's some potential there, I think, with a new finance director coming on board too, to kind of, someone that's got an outside perspective, kind of help through all that. And just kind of, look at different ways. And it gives us time too to even look at like how we're billing out the sewer stuff. So the sewer stuff is where I really am hung up with this plan here.
Okay. Two things with the sewer that's kind of driving that. One is that increase from Fargo, and the second one is to sending more to Fargo for our waste, and to decommission those lagoons. That number, we're currently sending 2.75 million gallons a day over there. In the budget this year for 2025, we're asking to increase that to 3 million gallons, and then the number we kind of need to get to is 3.5. And looking forward with that, those I guess those rates coming from Fargo and anticipated increases maybe every 2 years. There is a way with this plan here, we can get to 3.5 million in 2026, and that stabilizes our budget. Then it's just small little jumps instead of those big hits, every few years. That would hit about 600,000 next year instead of just that about 400,000. So if we did leave this as is, we could hit that a little bit sooner. And then all we would do is, if there's small increases, if we had to go to, say, 3.6 million, or if there was an increase from Fargo, that's the only difference that would really adjust that budget. So we wouldn't see those huge jumps anymore once we get to that 3.5 level.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
So, I think one question's gonna lead to another, but, I don't remember the exact meeting, Mr. Anvig, but, when we got our rates, proposed increase rates from Fargo for 25 and 26, there was 2 different rates, but if we agreed to a 2-year deal, it was a different rate than 25 and 26. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, there was, 25 was lower, 26 was higher, and then they kind of just did the average of the two to come up with those rates. And doing that 2-year rate was cheaper than doing it 1 year at a time that way. So that's why we're proposing to go with that 2-year kind of freeze rate, so it's the same rate from Fargo for 25 and 26.
So would we be better to advise or to vote on 25 and 26? Or how, do you see where I'm kind of going with
Yeah,
that?
it's a better deal to go with the 2-year rate. And then once we already know what that dollar figure is coming from Fargo, then we can adjust our budget on 26. So, and we're kind of factoring those forecasts in with these. So I think we'd be okay just voting on that 25 this year. And then we can kind of see where we're at, especially where, if we find any kind of efficiencies or savings this year, and then we can hit, see where we're at for next year, if we can get to that 3.5 million and where those reserves are sitting. But I think we'd get kind of back in the black here with this proposal.
So these numbers are with the 2-year rate?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Zundell.
Can you remind me, when was the last time we increased our sewer rates?
2020.
And we've made decisions specifically across time to try and keep them low, obviously trying to be budget conscious. I will say one of the things I heard over and over when I was running would be the concept of wanting to rely less on special assessments. And I think one of the things to keep in mind with these utility rates that I think is going to be a great thing is I think this is an opportunity to do that in some areas. So I just wanted to point that out. And I think the fact that I personally would rather have smaller increases if we're going to have them, because I think these large jumps are concerning for people, especially when there's not the history. But I think it's also something to review again. In the history of this, we made a decision to send stuff to Fargo. And this is ultimately a vastly cheaper option for us to do that than relying on something that we would have within the city. So unfortunately, I think with that, it's just a good reminder that we're to some degree reliant on what their rate increases are. So I dislike, obviously, the rate increases as well, but I also think that we are in a position now where we are in the red, where we're losing money on it. And I don't think we should be doing that either. I don't think that's fiscally responsible for the long term.
Additional questions from Mr. Anvik? Commissioner Olson?
Your rates don't provide anything for, as what we've talked about before, for bulky item pickups. So that was something that Commissioner Zundell was going to bring, I thought was going to bring up. So we've got the monthly increases, or the per, the water rates and the sewer rates, but what about under sanitation for the bulky item pickup? Because we know we're losing money on that to the tune of over $250,000 a year. So that's something I think we need to address too, along with this.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
So that was earlier, with the meeting that Commissioner Anderson and I are going to have, is as things changed on July 1st, we're going to see if the citizens adapted to some and we need to make the minor changes. So that is gonna be under evaluation here next month. And we'll decide about the bulky. Mr. Jacobson has been well ahead, and Mr. Anvik both in that meeting. There wasn't a question they couldn't answer between Commissioner Anderson and myself about, once we made the change, we knew there was gonna be some pushback, and they were in front of it. I commend them both for that meeting when we walked into.
But aren't we gonna make that, when would that change take place? Well, not until July, or are we gonna do it first of the year?
So we're gonna have that meeting in October, and
We've made an operational change. We made that in July.
Right.
And we started charging for some of that stuff now. And what we were told in July was that there wasn't enough data to see what the effect is. And so when we meet in October, we're gonna meet and have the data, enough data, have a couple of holidays in there, things like that in there to review that. So I think if we were to go in and, with this budget, it'd be a little tough, potentially, to look at how things, we have very limited
Okay, so
amount
it's
of
not
data.
off the table. Yeah, it's still
Not,
being
yeah.
discussed.
It's,
Okay.
yeah, I guess to clarify that a little bit, yeah, I mean, what we'd like to see in that, we're gonna have that meeting, is to get about 3 months of data so we can see where we're going with it and how everybody is, reacting to the new changes. Right now, we're down to maybe 9 pickups a day for bulky items right now. We're like 10, 11 with appliances, but we are charging for the appliances. And we're, between 15 and 20 for branch pickup right now, which that'll kind of go away as well. So we're seeing kind of that decrease, and we'd like to get a little bit more data on that, because now once we have that 3 months, now we're getting into where the school is and too, so that might change a little bit as well. So it'd be nice to have a little bit better handle on what exactly the usage is going to be, and if we need to make that change or not.
Of the 9 pickups a day on bulk items, are they requesting? Are they calling?
Yes,
in and-
they are.
That's part of the system is working?
Yes, and our system is working really well so far. We have the guys that'll go around and pick up the bulky items, and then they switch over, we'll pick up any appliances on there, and then they hop back onto any kind of commercial route or doing some can repair or deliveries. So,
Some of our public was very concerned that, we're just running streets, driving streets. That's not the case anymore.
nope.
We're strictly by appointment.
Yep, oh, yeah, that has been working quite well, actually, so.
the
that
so-called chase
streamlines.
vehicle is gone.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have a route for that vehicle for that bulky pickup, so that's been working quite well, actually.
Well, and like I said, I commend you and Mr. Jacobson. I mean, you guys are in front of it. We looked at it as, or what Moorhead is doing, they've been doing it for 30-some years. Just change the name, move it to West Fargo, and we will come back in late October, early November with our recommendations from that. And we'll include Commissioner Zundell, as she's the second on the portfolio also.
Very good, thank you.
If I,
Please,
just
Commissioner.
one more, just to kind of piggyback on a question that previously Commissioner Olson had asked and Commissioner Zundell had brought up, about had we kind of did a little exercise and ran some numbers, had we built our own water plant, sewer plant, if feasible back in the day, we currently would be at, our base rate for sewer would be about $23.85, and our flow rate would be about $10.66. So that would be putting, just your sewer alone for 4,000 gallons would be about $66. And if you had 6,000 gallons, that's $87. And had we built our own water plant, we'd be somewhere in the neighborhood of $13.78 for a base rate and $14 for $14.06 for a flow charge. So that'd be another $70 on a 4,000 gallon per month, and almost $100. You'd be $98.14 if you're using $6,000 a month. So it's almost an 80% increase had we built our own at the time, even if it was feasible. So the direction they did go back then to connect with Fargo is definitely the cheapest one by far.
Thank you. Additional comments, questions? Commissioner Olson?
So is this an actionable item?
Yeah, it is an actionable item.
I didn't know.
Unless we choose to put it off for some more discussion or gathering more data. Yeah, Commissioner?
What?
Did you?
I don't have any questions, no. I guess I'd like to make a motion to approve The water rates as presented, sanitation rates as presented, Fargo, the forestry and vector as presented, and sewer rates with a, we'll go straight up numbers, 570 for the flow rate, 1282 for the base rate, which represents a 15% reduction in the incremental increase we're asking, and this would be for 1 calendar year, 2025.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. I might have to ask you to restate that motion a little bit, Commissioner, but it is for the approval of the rates with the as presented, with the exception of sewer, where there's an amendment offered of a 15% from the original.
From the incremental increase.
All right, very good. Is there any further discussion?
So if we take 15% off, what does that look like?
With that,
It just comes out of what we would have in reserves?
correct, with that reduction, that'd be about $350,000 off the revenue that we wouldn't see. That's gonna change your rates. That would be a savings of, on 4,000 gallons, about $1.70 a month, and about a little under $2.30 a month for that.
So like $1.70 a month off of,
Of a 4,000 gallon bill, so that would change that about 70 cents, or about $1.70.
and would this affect our bottom line general budget, or would this just affect what you were bringing in to kind of transfer over into planned reserves?
That would it would decrease what we had planned for reserves by about 350,000, yeah.
And what is the long-term trade-off of that? If we're taking in $350,000 less for that reserves, what is the trade-off?
With that, we would not be up to our, I guess what our goal would be was for that 2 months reserve. We'd be short of that with that
We
15.
still don't have 2 months reserve in our,
No, we would probably, our reserve levels at the end with that would be about 722,000. And we need about 1.1 million to hit that 2 month reserve.
so my comment would be, I think unfortunately the numbers are the numbers. We've kicked the can down the road of not increasing rates, and I think we are here, and I would say from a fiscal and bonding perspective, not having 2 months of reserves in a sewer account is not responsible.
Thank you. Commissioner Olson?
Would, by decreasing the increase in the sewer rate for 25, that would then possibly increase the rate in 26?
Correct. According to this forecast and thing, yeah, we would probably have to maybe increase a little bit more in 26, depending on what, kind of the forecast and depending what we wanted to do. It would definitely change the idea of going to try and push that to 3.5 million to kind of level that out. But anything's doable.
Because if we keep, like as Commissioner Zundell, kicking the can down the road, that delays the progress on decommissioning the lagoons, because then we can't send all of the sewage over to, the wastewater over to Fargo as anticipated. Be ready for the diversion, which then we can sell the land up there and then use those revenues for other purposes within the city budgets. So we're just basically kicking the can down the road a little bit.
And did I misinterpret something? Because Mr. Anvik, you just stated that if we do a reduction of 15%, it's less money that would transfer for reserves, not what Commissioner Olson just suggested.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is that
well,
not-
it would kind of be both then, but yeah.
It's a paper thing. I understand that.
But yes, it would
Is the
kind of
reality.
lower reserves and give us less flexibility down the road. Correct.
Yeah, it's, on paper, you can draw this all out.
Right.
Commissioner?
I think my other concern is, the reality is, I think we all know we have failing sewer in many parts of the town, and so I guess if we don't have 2 months in our reserves, or we don't have a buffer, like what happens if something major happens within some of these knowingly old systems?
I would maybe go to Dustin on that one, but I would assume that would end up being maybe a capital improvement project, or maybe, I guess, a loan through, or transfer to the sewer fund.
Do we have the ability to bond right now in our sewer fund?
Thank you, Commissioner Zundel. So last year, we did approach our bonding agent, Colliers, and inquired on getting a utility revenue bond, which is a combination of water and sewer utility revenue. And as of last year, we were well behind the ability to be able to issue a bond.
Correct. Because of the reserves, essentially. Would that be accurate?
Reserves and.
And the fact
we
we're
do
running
have two
negative?
We currently have two bonds that we are paying off. So we either have to satisfy that debt, bring that debt payment down, we have to increase revenues, or reduce expenditures. So again, as of last year, we did not have either of those three.
I'm not thinking that
categories
probably
to satisfy.
changed over a year based on the fact that we know we're running a negative. So I think the risk of not doing this is, again, not being able to bond for major projects if and when they come up, which I think that's a very real concern that could happen. And I think we are inevitably kicking the can on the road, and I think that we've done that for the last however many years. And I would prefer personally to see smaller increments over time. I think we have to get caught up with where we need to be, but.
Is there any more discussion on the motion? Anyone? All of those in favor of Commissioner Anderson's motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes on a 3-2 vote. But the direction would be a 15% discount on the sewer side.
On the increase.
Increase.
And the increase. So to clarify that, you want to just do that 15%?
So,
Do the calculations, it's talking real dollars and cents.
yeah, so what I calculated was $5.70 for the flow rate. So I was taking $2 increase times 0.85, adding that to the current.
Yeah, because I think we had 572, but would be on that. But we can double check that. It'll be either 570 or so. But I don't know if that was voted on, or which, I guess, clarification.
It was a
Do we wanna-
15% reduction on
15% reduction.
on the incremental increase, so the $2
Okay.
and the $4.50.
We'll do that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Andrews. Item number 4 is a request to consider amending the city ordinances to increase the impervious square footage of residential lots from 30% to 35% of the lot in its entirety. Mr. Dan Flatten has brought this forward as a West Fargo resident, and he has been working with planning and zoning. So, Mr. Flatten, would you like to come forward, please? Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. Dan Flayton, 2303 Rivers Bend Drive East. Currently, I'm a resident in West Fargo, moving to that address. In a building situation, I'm trying to build a Rambler on a fairly large lot, and it's really tough to get it on 30%. I know it's a problem out in that area specifically. Everybody's starting to build 2 stories. I'm a little older than a lot of them. They seem like a lot younger, and they're building a lot bigger houses. But I'm trying to stay on one level, and it's hard to build a Rambler at 30% of the buildable area, which is everything underneath the roof. So that's my request, is to change that from 30 to 35%. And on those large lots, we're not pushing the borders at all. I'm 24 feet from my neighbor's lot. I believe you have the plot plan there, and I do have it with here if you guys want to pass it around or not, but it just makes it real hard and difficult to build and stay within that 30%.
I have visited the site to see what the distance and what that looked like with regard to the neighbors' property lines, the spacing, that actually went over and visited with the neighbor, and he was totally fine with it. This is one of the ordinances that a number of cities are re-looking at due to the fact of the cost of land and the size of lots and all of those types of things. I've had communication with Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson, would you please join us? And he acknowledged that this is one of those things that the commission should consider. Please.
Thank you. Yep, so I'm here to answer any questions the commission may have. In conversations with the applicant, just to reiterate a little bit of what he already covered, the zoning district that the property is located within is the R1A zoning district, which is one of our residential zoning districts. Currently has a restriction on a maximum lot coverage of 30% of the total lot area. And so what that means is the primary structure plus any accessory structures cannot exceed 30% of that total lot area. And so essentially the request that's being made tonight is for the city commission to direct staff to bring forward an ordinance amendment in order to increase that 30% up to something like 35%. And so what I told the applicant, what I told the mayor, is that staff doesn't have any concerns with increasing that percentage. As the commission president noted, that is a direction that a lot of cities are going. I will say the zoning ordinance, some of our zoning ordinances anyway predate our current comprehensive plan. I will say our comprehensive plan starts to lean more towards some of the increase in density, allowing for some added value on a square footage basis, for example, within our city. So again, happy to answer any questions you may have for staff.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Mr. Flayton contacted me too, and I did go check out the lot and looked at it. And as West Fargo is growing, we are seeing bigger lots, and people are building bigger houses. Could we look into possibly amending our ordinance, or, to include a bigger house on a bigger lot by square footage of property versus deal? I mean, there's other cities that have been down this road. We just need to grab 3 other cities and adopt their ordinance. And, like Mr. Flayton said, and Bernie talked to the neighbors. There was no neighbors there when I was out there, but I just walked around it too. And it's like, houses are getting bigger, and who knows what's gonna happen west of here when we keep going. We just need to get in front of it. So, I mean, I'm fully behind making this motion, but let's get in front of it so we don't keep making a motion as we keep going on.
Yep.
This is just to direct staff to look
Yes.
into it. We're not approving his
Right,
request.
yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Brett.
The language
Sorry,
will have to come for us before we make an appointment.
Yeah.
You have something?
She can go first.
Adele?
I just want to clarify, are we voting on something specific to Mr. Clayton's lot, or nothing at all? We're just voting you to consider making a change in the ordinance?
We're asking staff directing staff to move forward to increase it from 30 to 35% when it comes to the impervious surface.
On this lot.
Well,
Everywhere.
Oh,
I respectfully, Mr. Nelson, please.
Yeah, thank you. I can kind of clarify that. So it would not be specific to this lot. It would be specific to the R1A zoning district. So any properties within the R1A zoning district would be, the change from 30 to 35% would be all of that zoning district.
I would be very uncomfortable doing it for a specific lot as well. If this is a consideration we should do for our community and for our taxpayers, then it should be all-inclusive.
my apologies. I was misunderstood. I thought it was lot specific for this. That's why my last comments were to see what everybody else. My apologies.
Nope. And
Mr. Anderson?
Comment and then a question. So I really actually kind of struggle with doing a wholesale change to something like this for the whole city. Actually, 2 questions, apologies. One is, do we have anything for variance that property owners can come forward with for this? And number 2, just looking at an aerial overview of the neighborhood where this property is, it looks like there might be some properties that have more than 30%, more than 30% coverage of the lot. So is it something that's actually being enforced or looked at?
it is something that's being enforced and looked at. It's something that is reviewed upon building permit application. And then your first question about the variance, yeah, variance is an option. That option was discussed with the applicant as well. A variance is intended to be an option of last resort and does require a showing of some type of hardship that's unique to the property. which can be a significant barrier to kind of get over for for an applicant. And so it's not necessarily that there's a hardship in this case, it's just a request to consider loosening up the restrictions a little bit.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else from Mr. Nelson? Again, the action what we're requesting here this evening is direct staff to come up with an amendment.
I motion to instruct staff to look into an amendment from going from 30 to 35%.
Thank you, Commissioner Zundell. Is there a second, please?
I second.
Commissioner Jorgensen seconds. Been moved and seconded to move forward with an amendment language as directed to staff on a 30 to 35% increase on impervious square footage of residential lots. And it does say specifically residential lot. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We move on to item number 25, or number 5, excuse me, for A24-23, North Pond at the Preserve, 18th edition, request for final plot approval. We're going to call on Mr. Aaron Nelson, and Director of Planning. But before we do, excuse me, we have Leslie at the podium. Before we do that, I neglected to make a comment earlier, and I apologize for it. With regard to the public hearing that we had on the preliminary budget, there were some submittals that came in written, but people were unavailable to be here this evening. For the record, those public comments that they requested, or the specific things that they talked about the preliminary budget, are included in the record. All of the commissioners have copies of them, as well as in the correspondence file that is in the City of West Fargo's website. So if anybody's concerned that somebody sent in a letter and they weren't able to be here because for whatever reason, it is in the public record. And I apologize that I should have stated that earlier. I missed my own notes. So again, Leslie, please.
Good evening, Commissioners, Honorable
evening,
Mayor.
welcome.
Leslie McGillivray-Rivas, Senior Planner with the City of West Fargo. You have before you a request for approval of a final plat and a subdivision development agreement for North Pond at the Preserve 18th Edition. This is a replat of Lot 1, Block 3, North Pond at the Preserve 9th Edition. To orient the Commission, this information is in your packet for review, but for the audience, just briefly, the lot is in this location. To contextually, it's south of the Costco. It is west of Veterans Boulevard, and our city offices are over here on 6th Street. The Rusted Recreation Center is down here in the southeast corner. The existing zoning is C, light commercial. The applicant wishes to subdivide the property to forward the aspirations of development for the city for additional commercial parcels. So we've gone from 1 lot to 7. One large lot at the north, and this is the site plan that was submitted in support of that aspiration. There will be a private drive, which will have private utilities going through the site. The name of it is 50 feet in width. Private utilities will be going through it. There is an access way that has a controlled access at the southern entrance. There is a divided road on 26th Avenue, so the access will be coming easterly on the Alexander Way East on Bluestem Drive, and it'll be accessed to cars going westerly to the private drive. So as I mentioned, we're seeking approval of the final plat and subdivision development agreement, which have been submitted in context and before you tonight. I'm here for questions.
Question, Commissioner Zundell.
I presume the developer will pay for the private road?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Olson.
And it's been reviewed with police and fire and for vehicle, for access that way too, for fire to be wide enough. And then also, who's going to clean the streets and things like that? Is that going to be us, or is it going to be done privately?
That will be the private entity. Okay. And the pre-development meeting was several months ago that we met, and when we have representation from all of our city departments, including the fire, and they did not express concern at that time. And specific review will occur as each building permit comes before us, as the lots develop, and they'll be under a little bit more scrutiny at that time.
Thank you.
Additional questions?
I make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Zundel moves to approve the A24-23 North Pond at the Preserve 18th edition for the final plot approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded. Again, we're dealing with the A24-23 of the North Pond at the Preserve 18th edition for final plot. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 6 is the short-term rental information and discussion. Again, we're going to call on Mr. Aaron Nelson, the Director of Planning.
Thank you and good evening. So at the August 5th, 2024 Commission meeting, the City Commission directed staff to explore policy options regarding the topic of short-term rentals of residential property. And so in response, staff has drafted the memorandum included in your meeting packet here tonight, which summarizes staff findings from other communities in the area on this topic, outlines some of the key issues associated with short-term rentals, and then provides a few options for discussion and consideration by the City Commission. So tonight, I'll just provide a quick overview of the memo and stand for any questions you may have. But ultimately, if there is desire for further action, staff would be looking for additional direction from the City Commission. So with that, I'll open up the memo here and walk through it here quick. Computer's frozen on me. There we go. Okay, it's working now. First, I'd like to just give a special thank you to Lisa Sankey, planner in our department, who did a lot of the research for this, reached out to several communities in the area to find out a little bit more information on what other cities are doing, as well as the police department, who had also done some research ahead of time, just based on some of the calls and complaints that they've received in recent months or years. So with that, I'll jump down to the memo included in the packet, just to start with some of the findings from those other communities, other cities in the area. So in summary, short-term rentals can be found in pretty much any community in the country. Likely due to the small numbers, most jurisdictions in our area, however, take a hands-off and wait-and-see approach to short-term rentals. Short-term rentals are, for the most part, more popular and more prevalent, I should say, in some of those vacation destinations or areas with active tourism industries and whatnot. And so just as an example, the cities of Fargo, Moorhead, Grand Forks, Bismarck, and Sioux Falls all do not have specific regulations regarding short-term rentals, provided they're meeting all other applicable city requirements. However, there are a couple of jurisdictions in the area that do have specific regulations, and those include Otter Tail County in Minnesota, which is in the Lakes Country, as well as Duluth, Minnesota. So both of which have larger than average, probably tourist activities compared to many cities. Yes?
When you're doing your research, did you check to see if they're collecting any lodging taxes?
That was part of the research. And just to touch on that very briefly. So for the city of West Fargo, we do have, I think it's a 3% lodging tax that's required. Currently, it's up to when it comes to short-term rentals, it's up to the individual property owners to be supplying that or providing that property tax to the city of West Fargo directly, which is unique as opposed to like sales tax, which is collected by the state. Lodging tax is collected directly by the city. And so as of right now, it's kind of, like I said, it's the responsibility of the owner. And so there's not any enforcement or action that I should say that I'm aware of currently in terms of policing that at the moment. And that's one of the challenges that I'll touch on here as well. In terms of Duluth and Otter Tail County, the specific provisions that they have some specific ordinance language relating to short-term rentals, and they do also require permitting and licensing, and then have some regulations that follow that are specific to short-term rentals, such as occupancy limitations, quiet hours, and some additional parking restrictions that are specific to short-term rentals. The next section of the memo outlines a few key issues and considerations when thinking about possible policy options here. I think the most prevalent, and I think the reason that this was originally brought up is the first one on there, neighborhood integrity and community impact, which includes increased visitor traffic and potential disruptions to existing neighborhoods. Examples include things like noisy parties when you have a rental that you rent out to folks that bring people together in a confined space like that. The second one there is economic benefit and revenue potential, which includes accommodating tourism, some supplementary revenue for homeowners, as well as some opportunity for additional tax revenues, such as the lodging tax. Third one is just cost of regulation and enforcement, something to consider, which includes potential administrative costs for such things as developing, implementing, and enforcing short-term rental regulations. And this can be particularly difficult in terms of short-term rentals just due to the peer-to-peer nature of these transactions through some of these online platforms. It's not always super apparent if a home is being rented out on one of these platforms unless there's some visible evidence of that taking place. And then lastly, maybe not super applicable to the city of West Fargo, but housing affordability and market impact, just recognizing that short-term rentals can displace the number of housing units available for residents. Much more of a problem, obviously, in some of those more active tourist destinations. So jumping down to the next page here, some of the options for consideration that we've outlined here. Option number one, it's always important to consider the do-nothing option. So that's kind of the summary there, is no new regulations. We would just handle the issues as they come up based on existing city ordinances. The city could continue to monitor and assess the need for future action, trying to decide when it becomes a significant enough of an issue to take some action. Option number two would be some targeted ordinance updates for enhanced enforcement, focusing on updating ordinances to give code enforcement more tools to address neighborhood concerns. We've heard from the police department that all they can really do sometimes is issue a noisy party citation, for example, which is a relatively minor fine, and there's not much else they can do, especially if there's repeat offenses occurring. Sometimes it's challenging to get in touch with the property owner when the folks renting the place might not come to the door or respond to those calls. This option could allow short-term rentals by right, but we could better define the parameters for short-term rentals, including limitations and applicable penalties for violations, or maybe some enhanced penalties for violations. And then finally, option three would be the more comprehensive ordinance update with and including short-term rental licensing and permitting requirements. This would involve drafting of new ordinances and the establishment of a licensing and permitting process. But this obviously would require the most staff resources, but at least some of these additional staff costs could be offset by licensing and permitting fees. So lastly, just in summary, each option obviously has its trade-offs, and so in considering what's best for the city of West Fargo, we have heard from the police department that they have been called to properties. Sometimes it's probably just a handful of repeat offenders. It's not all short-term rentals. But certainly it is a documented issue, and so kind of starts to point to options 2 or 3, taking some type of action. But just based on the relatively small number of short-term rentals in West Fargo compared to other communities, maybe option 2 would be the kind of right size approach for West Fargo. Ultimately, though, we'll leave that up to the City Commission to discuss. I'm here for any questions you all have, and ultimately, if you do want to take further action, we would be looking for some additional direction for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Commissioners? Commissioner Zundell.
I tend to lean towards option 3, just number 1, to stay ahead of it. Number 2, I think to ensure that it has, to some degree, I guess, a little more teeth as far as losing, the ability to lose a license over the ability just to fine people or to give them tickets for violating ordinances. I think if we do 2, there's, you can pay a fine, you can do whatever. But I did hear from a good chunk of residents that live next to some short-term rentals that express that it is fairly problematic. I think it's a consideration. I know personally I'd want to know if I was moving in next to a short-term rental. I think, again, the ability to have licensing would make that to some degree probably publicly available if people were looking when they were buying homes. But I do see, more and more companies buying up houses, making them into long-term rentals in some of the different kinds of neighborhoods. So I think it's going to be a growing issue that I would rather be ahead of as opposed to reactive to.
Thank you. How will you identify them?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have the final answer on that here tonight, but on many of the platforms like VRBO or Airbnb, you can search the city of West Fargo, and then any available properties would pop up on that website. So that would be one means to identify them. The other would be like we are kind of identifying currently when we do receive complaints. There could be some investigation at that point in terms of whether or not it is a short-term rental.
My thinking was you'd have to track it just about on social media or Airbnb or whatever, and then put the West Fargo address in, and they're gonna pop up, and then that's how you do your enforcement action. Okay. Commissioner, Anderson, please.
I probably already know the answer. Do we know how many there are, roughly?
Roughly, we did reach out to Airbnb just to try and find a definitive number. We didn't get an answer from them, but just doing a search, for a variety of different dates, there's at least a couple dozen in the city of West Fargo on that platform alone.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Would these properties be subject to inspection by fire department? Is their rental unit no different than a motel? And
Yeah, so any existing rental requirements that the city has would apply to short-term rentals. I would, presumably today, depending upon the specific ordinance, but, depending upon which option, the commission would like to go with, that could be a consideration if there's any, an enhanced inspection that would be required or any additional requirements that we would want to place on short-term rentals specifically.
so with that said, I'd like to somehow see like a license and a fee, because the city's gonna incur cost, whether it's the fire department goes there, police department, whatever. I get fining them. They're just gonna pass the fine along to the renters, but sink some teeth into it.
So, Mr. Nelson and his department need some direction here. He's come up with three considerations for us, or obviously we could go with a fourth one of a hybrid of combination of 1, 2, and 3, but so.
I make a motion for option 3.
Commissioner Zundell moves for option 3. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded that we move forward with option 3 and direct planning and zoning accordingly. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Jorgensen?
I'd like to see like fire department inspections and that involved, being it is a rental property, and safety is always the first concern. And I've used VRBOs. I love them. They're a great deal. People have a great deal there, but they still need to be held responsible and make the residents safe.
Anybody else? We have a motion and a second for option 3. Any more discussion?
Just for clarification, this is just to direct staff to work on an ordinance. We're not approving an ordinance as of yet. That'll come maybe later.
That is correct.
Okay.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Item number 7 is a request for an enterprise grant for Sandy's Donuts. We call on Casey Sanders Berglund, Director of Economic Development. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, President, Commissioner, Commission. Tonight, the project I have before you is for Marcor LLP, or doing business as Sandy's Donuts. So for tonight, I'll just refer to Sandy's Donuts, I think is how we all know the business. This applicant is proposing to use economic development sales tax funds through the enterprise grant program, essentially to renovate their existing space on Cheyenne and Main. The larger portions of the work aim to update some of the exterior portions, such as the parking lot lights, and the commercial entrance or retail entrance. There are some interior parts to the project, such as some tiling, cabinetry, things like that, were included in the bids that were provided to myself as the overall application. And then just as a reminder for the public, when these applications are taken in, myself and the Economic Development Advisory Committee vet these projects and look through the eligibility based on the fact that they're located in the downtown mixed-use zone, and they are meeting the eligibility standards such as extending the lifespan of the property within the zone, as well as facade improvement and the walkability and the enjoyment and walkability of this area. So with that, this program asks for the applicant to spend a minimum of $150,000 with the option of $75,000 or 50% reimbursable. So this project has over $150,000 of bids that have gone out, and they, at the last Economic Development Advisory Committee, they received approval for the maximum reimbursable amount at $75,000. With that, I'd stand for any questions, as well as the owner, one of the owners, Jeff, is here if there's any questions about the business.
Questions, Commissioner? Ms. Berglund?
Make motion to approve.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve the enterprise grant for Sandy's Donuts. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Jorgensen seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the enterprise grant for $75,000 for Sandy's Donuts. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you,
you.
Ms. Berglund. The City Commission stands adjourned for 5 to 7 minutes. Westwood Addition reconstruction, Mr. Hanson, city engineer. Purpose of the discussion is to create an improvement district number 3006. District engineer to prepare an engineer's report and approve a task order for preliminary engineering services. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Commissioner, President Dardis, and Commissioners. This project has been talked about for a number of years. It was originally identified in the original core study as an important project to move forward with due to the aging of the existing utilities in the neighborhood, as well as the roadway and the infrastructure. And recently we did we renewed the core area study, and again, this came up as a top priority. This would be our first reconstruction of an existing residential neighborhood in the core area since we've adopted the 2024 CIP. In that CIP, we had originally, previous to that adoption, assessed 70% of the costs to the neighborhood. What was presented and passed by this commission, or by the commission, was to reduce the amount of special assessments down to 30%, which makes the project more affordable to those benefiting properties. So we did conduct a neighborhood study in 2022. That's included in the packet. That was received, I think, fairly well as far as recognizing that there's a need for the project. What I will say is that study did not talk about costs. It only said, you know, do you experience ponding water? Do you feel that improvements are necessary? Questions with regards to the infrastructure. It was not a flyer that was put out or a survey that was put out asking for, would you like to pay for it? How much do you want to be assessed for it, or anything like that? So please don't make any assumptions that there was any costs involved with that. We'd like to move forward because this project was identified to be constructed in 2025 on the 2024 CIP. Moving forward with the project at this time allows us enough time to get the design done and go through the assessment process to go out for bids early in 2025 to take advantage of being early on the bidding block and take advantage of more contractors needing work. So we believe that will help reduce prices eventually with the bids. Excuse me. I'll jump down and show you the improvement district. Like you can see here, 7th Avenue West runs along the north side of this neighborhood. North Elmore Park is also just south of the neighborhood, and you can see there's a number of residential properties in there. And the other thing to include in this district is the Elmwood Park, because there are some improvements that that are intended to be placed within that park, so they would be included in the district. The intent would be to reconstruct all the utilities, reconstruct all the roadways, basically start to finish for this neighborhood, and eventually construct that in 2025. We would likely assess the project in 2026, generally speaking, which the payments would go on the 2027 taxes for the neighborhood. The project was identified again for 2025 construction in this 2024 CIP. It had an estimated cost of $7,475,000, which would be intended to be paid for via 30% being special assessed, with the remainder of it being paid for utilizing capital improvement sales tax and possibly utility funds. That was one of the things that was brought up earlier today, is if we're able to have surplus in utility funds, potentially there could be monies taken from those utility funds and used to pay down the costs of projects. The other thing that we're looking at doing is we've been looking for different ways to get grant money for this. Generally speaking, there hasn't been much in the way of being able to get grants for that. Recently had a meeting with More Engineering who brought up the funding source with the state that could potentially pay for 60% of the cost of the water main replacement in there. I was not aware of that, so kudos to them for bringing that to my attention. Part of the task order that's in front of you tonight is for us to apply for those funds.
Part of applying for those funds is we have to inventory the city's system, but once you do that once, you've pretty much got the inventory that you have. So if this is something that comes to fruition, that we are able to get those grant dollars, and it is something that we want to apply for again, the work that's being done right now is going to be able to be used in future applications as well. So tonight starts the process of beginning the project, which excuse me, would create the improvement district 3006. You'd be directing me to prepare the engineer's report, which would be having our consultant put together a feasibility study that I would use to prepare that report that I would bring back to the commission, and also to approve a task order for those preliminary engineering services. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson. Commissioner Olson.
Dan, could you put the map up on there? Up at the north end there, appears to be two properties that are now in the gray shaded area. Could you explain if they're in or out of the project area?
They are inside of the improvement district boundary, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're being assessed for the project. I would project that those two lots would have zero costs from this project. They get their sewer and their water from 7th, and also they don't have access to the interior roadways. Even though it was platted with this development, they're not a benefiting parcel. And I would also say the lot just to the east of that, those two. Also, I believe I need to, they're also included in the district, but I do not believe that they get their sewer and water from the east, and I believe their driveway is to the north as well. So they do have some side yard front footage that will be improved, but through the creation of this report, we would come back with a recommendation if that lot would be included with any proposed assessments for the project.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Yep.
Commissioner Zundell.
And we're anticipating that the cost to the resident would probably be drastically less than what you have in the staff report, because that would have been completed under a 70% assumption and of course without any grant money.
Correct. That was without grant money, and that was with us assessing 70%. And that's why this project has never came forward, is that I didn't feel comfortable bringing it forward with a potential assessment, because we did study this neighborhood in the past, and with the 70% assessments, depending on the size of the lot, the amount of front footage and things like that, the assessments in that previous report ranged from $44,493 to $85,793. And again, that's just not feasible. And when we talked in the past with the commission, that's where we decided we needed to come back with, as Commissioner President Darter said, maybe we need to do fewer projects and pay more for them. Also, potentially if there's prairie dog funds that come in as far as paying the city's portion, so that way we can assess less, and that is the justification that we used to lower the assessment amounts to 30% in that recent CIP.
So do you have a forecast, a range, with all that said and considered? Has it gone down significantly?
Costs of projects have went up since then. However, going from 70% to 30% is generally more than 50% cut. So I would say that we would, if you probably took a look at half of that, it might be there. But what I would say is that the intent of what we're approving tonight is to produce to hire a consultant to do a feasibility study, and that feasibility study is really what comes back with our estimated assessments.
Mr. Scott has something to add.
Thank you. I want to make a quick correction. It was our prior funding split was 60-40. So when we did the CIP and the project a couple years ago, it was a special assessed at 60%, not 70. Just want to, it has no change on what is moving forward, but if there is.
So in theory, we're cutting these numbers almost in
basically in half. I apologize. I do have 70% in my staff report. Thank you for the correction. I appreciate that. 60-40 was the previous study that was done in 2022 was on the 60-40 split, not the 70% that I have in the staff report. I do apologize.
So forgive me, but I used to live in this neighborhood, so I'm very familiar with it. So when your forecast is 44,493 to 85,793, okay? And if it's anywhere near that for an assessment for these residents in there, I can't possibly be in favor of a study, to spend money on a study. That's not affordable for those residents. If we don't have specifically of what the grant involves, how this drives the cost down and/or the participation of the city, I need better numbers. I need more current numbers before I'll spend money to chase this if we're gonna still be at, if one of those folks in that area is gonna be assessed $86,000, I can't live with that. I can't.
Those numbers are,
On the higher rate.
I understand that, but if we know that we're getting some grant money, if we know what our percentages and participation is, we owe it to the public to delineate that to them. This is causing undue anguish for those neighbors if they're still thinking that they're gonna get a $50,000 to $85,000 assessment. I can't live with that.
Commissioner President Dardis, those numbers are from that previous study before we dropped the amount of special assessments. So if we were assessing 60%, now we're assessing 30%. So those numbers are twice as high as what they would be if it was a 1-to-1 ratio.
But now you're telling me they're anywhere from 20,000 to 45,000.
Correct. If you just took the 60% to the 30% and you took those dollars and cut it in half, that is exactly what I'm saying. What I would say is if you just think of greenfield construction, you take a barren field and you make new lots out there with new residential, and the contractor has all the room in the world to work, and they're just able to, swing dirt around and install pipe. Specials on those new lots are 35, 45, I've heard $80,000 in different places. When you actually go in and reconstruct an existing neighborhood, compare the method of construction of having to stay out of people's yards. You don't have the room to work. You've got a whole bunch of utilities in the way, the power, the cable, those things like that. The cost of reconstructing a neighborhood as opposed to constructing a new neighborhood, it's just harder to construct it, so those costs are higher. The potential grant that we would get, that we're planning on applying for, that would be potentially a 60% grant just towards the water utilities in the neighborhood. And that would definitely lessen the cost of the project if we're successful in getting that. However, if we are going to wait until we get the results of applying for that grant, we need to move this project back to 2026, because there will not, I don't believe that there would be enough time by the time that we find out if we get the grant or not. And I could be wrong, but things take time to get grants, to be able to apply for them, get on the lists, and find out if we're funded. It very easily could kick this project back another year from 2025 to 2026.
Well, again, we're approving the task order for preliminary engineering services, which I can support, obviously. But every effort has to be made. If we haven't been listening in the last 2 to 3 years from our residents, whether it's property taxes, anything and everything, we're not doing our job. With all due respect, we're just not. And that's not on you, that's on us. And previous commissions and future commissions, as far as that goes. So we have to be extremely cognizant of the impact that it's gonna make on that neighborhood. And that's what I want protected. Community, the neighborhood integrity.
And to follow up on that comment, the sewer system that is televised in that neighborhood is at the point of almost failure.
Okay.
By us waiting, it would, in my opinion, it's imperative that we do the project, even if the commission comes back later and says we need to pay more to pay specials down or something. I think we can't wait on these core area reconstructs any longer, given the nature of it. For example, We're currently doing that core area sanitary sewer relining project. There was a lot of that project that was not able to be televised due to different things. We're getting out there and we're finding out that it is far worse than what we had anticipated. And actually at the next commission meeting, I'll be coming forth with a fairly sizable change order of spot repairs that we've needed to do out there. That is, we're finding places where literally the pipe doesn't exist. It's a hole through the clay that sewage is still flowing through. Thank goodness we moved forward and did the project when we did, and we were able to do that. But this core area, the sewer especially, water main you could patch when it breaks, but sewer, if it fails, you get back up into basements, things of that nature, and the need is definitely there. Hopefully the report will come back with some good numbers, and then at that point in time, even though we're creating a district, the commission always has the right to pay more for a project in the end, which we could apply grant funding towards. We can apply maybe other funds towards it, but the need is there.
All right, very good. Commissioner Zundell? Oh, Commissioner Jorgensen, I'm sorry. I thought you both had hands up. Commissioner Jorgensen.
So couple questions. What is the anticipated estimated cost now if this was from whatever, a year or 2 years ago?
I don't have that right in front of me, other than we did, actually I do have it in front of me, as far as what was on the core project that we did, that core study that we did. We have a cost of $7,475,000 that was identified on that core area study. I've increased the number that was on that core area study by a percentage of inflation for construction next year. So that number does not actually match the number that was in the core area report, but if you look at my 2024 CIP, I did include inflationary costs on my CIP, so that number should reflect the CIP number.
So roughly current.
That is roughly current, that 7.5 million basically.
And have we applied for this grant?
We need to, if we're not moving forward with the project, no. If we get approved tonight, part of the task order that we have in front of us is to do the work necessary to apply for the grant. But as I stated earlier, to apply for the grant, we have to inventory the entire city's water system. So we didn't just arbitrarily, apply for it, because there is quite a bit of work that's involved with that. Now, what I'll say is Public Works does an outstanding job of cataloging things, and I'm hoping that we can save some costs in that inventory by getting data input from Public Works, because they do a good job of knowing what's out in their system. So crossing our being able to analyze it off of GIS, things of that nature, as-built record drawings and Public Works data, it's just that data compilation. And then we need that to submit for the grant.
Do we know an approximate dollar value of the grant that we would apply for?
I don't have that in front of me. I could get a rough number for that based off of the preliminary engineering report that was done 2 years ago. If I was to just go back and take those numbers for the water amount, 60% of that construction cost is what we would be applying for. It's roughly, my gut tells me it's roughly close to $500,000, maybe $400,000, but significant.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Questions for Mr. Hanson?
Move we approve the task order.
Commissioner Olson moves that we prepare an engineer's report and approve a task order for the preliminary engineering services for Westwood Addition reconstruction, district number 3006, excuse me. Any further discussion?
I will second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second, excuse me. Thank you, Commissioner Zundell. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 9 is project number 1316.3, North Side Sanitary Sewer Collection Rehabilitation. Purpose of the discussion being brought forward by Mr. Dan Hansen, our city engineer, is to approve a task order for 87-1 for basic services. Mr. Hansen.
Thank you, Commissioner President Ardis and Commissioners. This project is one that I've discussed several times at recent meetings. This is for the paving and grading around the salt shack and around SA 40. What this is the task order to for the consultant for the design that they did, as well as some construction administration services. We also have we intend to do some of the construction administration services with our own staff as well. So that part of the task order is on an hourly basis. So if we can use our own forces for that, it gets cheaper. But we did include some work by the consultant to assist with that. So this is pretty straightforward. It does match our current MSA.
Thank you, sir. Questions, commissioners?
Move to approve.
Commissioner Anderson? Move. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the task order number 87-1 for basic services for project number 1316.3 North Side Sanitary Sewer Collect Rehabilitation. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 10, project number 9043, Sanitary Sewer System Re-Evaluation Study south of I-94. Again, we're going to call on Mr. Dan Hansen, our city engineer, and the purpose of the discussion is to approve a task order for sanitary sewer evaluation study. Mr. Hansen.
Thank you, Commissioner President Ardis and Commissioners. This is a new project, a new study that is being brought forth. If you recall, over the past, say, 5 years, about 5 years ago, we did a study that studied all of the sanitary lift stations north of I-94. That study was utilized to proceed with several different projects to rehabilitate existing lift stations and get those back up to speed that have deteriorated. That work is finishing up with the last of them. There's only just a couple different sanitary lift stations north of I-94 that haven't been worked on, but there's also plans for those in the future. What this study does is it sets the plate for us to move forward with rehabilitating sanitary lift stations on the south side of I-94 and on that side of our city. Some of those neighborhoods are approaching 20 years old, and so their lift stations are 20 years old, so they're starting to show wear and tear. Another thing that we are doing with this study is not only analyzing the lift stations, but one of the things that they're going to do is just redefine the wastewater flows, because the lift stations were designed for a factor of safety that you would put standard into a lift station design. However, I think we have a lot of sump pumps that are putting their sump pump water into sanitary lift stations. So even with the factor of safety that was in the original designs, we're finding in the high flow events, our lift stations at some point are having a hard time keeping up. So part of the study is going to be to take a look and analyze these flows, factor in that we have a lot of I&I issues. The best thing to do would be to find a way that residents would not put their sump pump discharge into the sanitary during the summer months, but I feel that's happening. And the enforcement of that, when they've just got two valves, you can go and take a look at it, and when the inspector's there, see them going outside, and as soon as they're gone, they can push it over and not have to have their yard wet again. So it is causing, I think, a lot of inflow into our system. But that being said, the lift stations are overtaxed during these high events, and we do need to take account for it. So they're going to take a look, reanalyze some of the designs. That way, when we're rehabbing some of these lift stations, we can increase the size of the pumps as we feel necessary. Also take a look at the force mains that are, that the sewage is pumping through. And the other thing that is included in this study is also a bit exciting. It is to analyze how are we going to provide sewer for the growth area on the southwest side of I-94 between the new diversion and 94. Right now, that is an unsewered area. We have had developers calling. We've got meetings set up with developers talking about where can we start building homes and in neighborhoods, things like that. Right now, MetroCog is doing a transportation study to take a look at what we want that area to look like with our our network of roadways after the diversion is done and it's certified and it starts developing. What this study is going to do is also going to help provide answers on how are we going to provide sanitary sewer, because right now we have our existing lift station SA40 that you're all familiar with. And we do have SA27 that's on the south side of the interstate off of Christensen Drive. And when that project was installed, there was a dual force main that was put in for redundancy with that. This study is going to take a look to see if there is a capacity within that system that we can potentially sewer that area and utilize those force mains. If we can do that, that would be much, much cheaper and much quicker than having to construct a huge lift station north of town and, put miles of force main and connecting lift stations in between this area. So taking a look at our future growth area on the south side of the interstate is included in this. And also there is a current agreement with the city of Mapleton that they're going to be pumping their sewage into our system, and that will be running through SA40. So they're also going to take a look, because we have been contacted by Mapleton that they have been able to receive some state money to do their project to be able to pump their sewage to West Fargo. So we want to prepare for being able to handle those flows, and also prepare if there's any improvements necessary to be ready for when Mapleton does connect to our system. That's an agreement that's already in place that was signed a number of years ago. But they've already been out acquiring the right-of-way to get here, and they do have some funding, is what I've been told, to do the project. So I believe, it won't be empty their lagoons right away. It's going to be a phased type of a thing, much like what we're doing with Fargo. But we need to be prepared for that. So that's also incorporated into the study. So a lot of the study is planning for the future, planning for growth, but also taking a look at the existing system and making sure that the sanitary lift stations that we have are going to be able to maintain sewage flows for the foreseeable future. And with that, today is just to approve the task order number 89, and I'd entertain any questions.
What do you anticipate this study to cost?
The task order is in the...
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry, I
Yep.
didn't go down far.
In there. The total cost of the study is $118,000.
My apologies.
That's okay. I will say in the 2024 CIP, I had put a placeholder of $100,000 for the study in anticipation of it coming, so there's a $100,000 placeholder in our CIP for this. Since then, that was more of a study to analyze just the south side lift stations. Since then, we've added taking a look at Mapleton sewage being added, and also potentially looking at those redundant force mains. So it is a little bit higher than what I had in there, but there is additional work that is being proposed to be done with this study.
Commissioner Zundell moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to move forward on project number 9043, sanitary sewer system evaluation study south of I-94, and approve a task order for sanitary sewer evaluation study. I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Corey. Please. Rory. Done. It's getting late. It's getting late. Commissioner Jorgensen.
My sun's going down.
No worries, that's my brother. So you mentioned improvement or improving the pumps for the capacity. When they were put in, why weren't they put in at full capacity for the volume of the pipe?
They were put in at the design standards with a factor of safety. There's industry standards for how much you take an area zoned, commercial, residential, and there's industry standards for your design, 10 state standards, things of that nature. So the pumps were designed according to design standards.
Okay.
The thing is one sump pump probably on a wet day provides the amount of flow for 2 weeks of a house. If we were to design With a 400% factor of safety, we would have massive lift stations and things like that. So there was no negligence in the design.
Thanks for the explanation.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Hanson.
Thank you.
Item number 11 is City Administrator's Report. We call on Dustin Scott, West Fargo City Administrator.
Well, thank you, Commission President Ardis and Commissioners. You guys have been hard at work tonight, so I'll try to be brief. First, I just wanted to go back to the utility rate discussion we had. I know Mr. Ranvick did mention it, but I just want to reiterate that following the approval tonight, now the next steps are to go through the legal process, the proper advertising and creating the resolutions. So Matt will be working with John Shockley on that. So you will see that back before you at some time here in the future. And then the other update I wanted to provide is that our finance director is starting on Wednesday. He is a few days earlier than we initially anticipated because he is going to attend the Municipal Finance Officer Association conference on Wednesday afternoon in Grand Forks, and then the North Dakota League of Cities conference on Thursday and Friday. So a great opportunity to start building a network, starting to listen and hear things North Dakota specific. So excited for him to be here in a couple days. With that, I will stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Scott? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any correspondence that we've received has been distributed to all the commissioners. Does any commissioner have any non-agenda items you'd like to bring forward at this time? Commissioner Jorgensen.
I'd like to call out Wendy. Thank you for your article in the paper for clarifying about Commissioner Olson and I being able to vote and the clarity of our conflict of interest. Some people in the public listen, but they don't hear. I know it's kind of harsh, but that's, they get behind their keyboard and they've made comments, and Mr. Shockley, thank you for your verbiage on that to clarify for everybody.
Does any other commissioner have anything? I want to thank the public for their engagement on the preliminary budget discussion that we had this evening. I also would like to thank the commissioners for their engagement. There's a lot of questions, a lot of digging that goes on behind the scenes that sometimes it might perceive as we have a discussion here, as one gentleman called out, that we don't have enough split votes. If you have a commission that's very engaged in getting the facts and digging into it, there is less than that, because there's great data that we have, historical data as well as data that we're creating to answer some of the questions that we have. I'd like to thank the staff. They have worked extremely hard on this. And there's been about 3 iterations of the preliminary budget at this time. When the first budget came in, I don't want to sound too harsh here, but it was dead on arrival. And the second budget, preliminary budget, came in, and that was wounded severely, but not quite dead. And then there was a third time and a fourth time. So there's been 4 reviews that I personally and Mr. Scott have went through, and that certainly speaks that the commissioners have been at least 4 to 5 deep on some of these issues. There are some great questions asked about furniture reusing or travel and education. At the present time, I have a list right here in front of me that when we talk about those iterations going back to the department heads regarding travel, regarding education, regarding materials, regarding staffing, and that timing of those hiring, I have a quick list here of $567,583 that these people, along with department heads, reevaluated their own requests. So, again, I'm very proud of the process. We're not done yet. We've got a ways to go. So if the public has any additional information that they want to share with us, One of the big issues right now that we're dealing with is, of course, there's several competing articles with regard to employee benefits and COLA raises and step raises and all those types of things. A lot of it is semi-accurate. So that'd be another big part of the discussion that we have going forward. So again, we thank the public, I thank the staff members, and I thank my fellow commissioners for their engagement and doing all that we can to try and make this budget palatable to the citizens of West Fargo. That being said, again, any commissioner have anything else that you'd like to bring forward? Does any department head have anything you'd like to bring forward? Mr. Hanson, it's getting late and I'm talking way too fast.
Thank you, Commissioner Dartis and commissioners. There was wanted to bring this up. There was an accident where a car and a pedestrian on a bicycle collided on the intersection of Veterans and 36th. I know there's been a lot of community outcry for something to be done at that intersection. I'm sure each one of you probably received the emails that I had shared with me as well. So I know we're on overtime here, so
That's fine. This is a very important discussion to have with the community.
Thank you. Little bit of a background. In 2020, kudos to Dustin, we commissioned a study to evaluate potential safety and traffic flow improvements along that corridor. That wasn't anything that was required. That was something that they did. But we used that study to apply for HSIP funding, which we were successful at. And we do have a project that's scheduled for next year that we're getting, I believe, 90% grant on the construction side of this. And we're partnering with Fargo because they own the east side of the roadway as well. But 36 and Veterans is included in that. And I was asked to just to give an update on what improvements can the public look for us to be doing to make that intersection safer. So I worked with Bolton and Mink, who's doing the design of that HSIP project for us, to get an overview, a brief rundown. And I'm going to kind of skip some of what they wrote and just go directly for time purposes to here's the improvements that we would be looking to see at that intersection. One thing that we're looking to do is have lead pedestrian intervals. Basically, when a pedestrian pushes the button, it turns all the signals red for 5 to 7 seconds, allowing the pedestrian with nobody entering the intersection to be able to at least get out into the intersection. And by doing that, they've established themselves in it. Everybody is in a stop condition, so it helps make them aware of it. And that, as studies have found, that reduces vehicle pedestrian crashes by up to 60%. We're doing restricted right turn so that when the pedestrians hit the button, you've probably seen them coming off the interstate. Sometimes there's basically a black sign that doesn't have anything on it until the pedestrian hits the button, and then it lights up no turn on red. That is one improvement that is potentially could have if that was in place, that potentially could have saved this crash from happening because it is that's exactly what was happening. Is somebody was queued up, they were the second or third one in line. There was a pedestrian crossing on the south side of the intersection heading westbound. The person coming out, both of them minors, was taking a right and mentioned that they thought that they were able to get their turn in before the bicycle got there, but it didn't happen, so that's why the crash happened. By having a no turn on red light up when they hit that push button, that would have at least given them one more chance to see something and say, I can't turn right. That also has been proven to reduce vehicle pedestrian crashes by up to 60%. The other thing we're going to do is what we've been in front of you with a lot of our signal projects is we're aligning the left turn lanes that are offset currently, so people at the left turn lanes don't have to look around the car in front of them that's also turning left. There's going to be a number of intersections where those left turn lanes will be aligned with this project. That allows left turn signal heads to be replaced with flashing yellow arrowheads, which have been found to be less confusing than shared left turn arrow green ball head configurations. This combination of improvements has been found to reduce left turn crash potential by 43%. Not pedestrian crash, but left turn crash potential. And then lastly, the thing that we're gonna see at that intersection also is a permitted left turn omit, which means when a pedestrian pushes the button, the flashing left turn movement will be omitted. So where we do have a flashing left turn arrow, when that button is hit, it does not allow that flashing left turn arrow anymore. So it gives that pedestrian, they can't turn left across a crosswalk when when the flashing don't walk indications are active. This has also been found to reduce vehicle pedestrian crashes by up to 28%. So wanted to get this to you. If you're getting contact by them, you can have people watch this video and know that we do hear them. We are working on it. This has been in progress for a number of years, since 2020 when we applied for it. Thankfully we did, because if we were applying for it now, it'd be 2030 by the time we'd be able to get that financial assistance to do that. So that's everything that I had, but I want to bring it to your attention that we are doing some improvements in the signals at that intersection.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Zundell.
The one thing that had been brought up in some of the emails that I thought was interesting is we don't have a school zone flashing light in that area. I know we have them at Cheney, and it sounds like they're by Cheyenne High School. Is that possible to add kind of in between? It just seems that it's odd that there's not one at that specific intersection.
So I
with
know
the amount of traffic that goes through there.
I know on 36, not on Veterans, but on 36 heading, there are the speed signs that are solar powered and let you know how fast you're going. It is not
There's
designated
just no like
as
blinking
school zone.
school zone, and we have one by the high school and we have one by the other middle school. So I'm wondering if that's something that we can look into just independently to add.
Yeah, I can take a look into that and see if that's something that should be done. It's an arterial roadway, as far as, I just want to verify that it should be done, but I can definitely look into that and potentially get some different kind of signage up or something like that, definitely. Because there was a lot of people reaching out and saying that the cars are just going too fast.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Along with that, 7th Avenue north of the West Fargo High School, it's the longest street around a school, but it's not considered a school zone on the street. There's no signs there whatsoever for being a school zone. And I know some people park across to the north. I don't know what the actual law is, but it's one of the longer streets that butts up against the school.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's more focus on creating school zones around elementaries than there is around high schools and things like that. But again, I could look into that as well for both of these situations.
I can say the police department does a great job. I mean, I drive up down First, and depends on what time of day I pick if I'm going First or Ninth.
Yep. Yep, absolutely.
Depends how the school's getting out, but I know there's definitely a police presence, and I applaud Chief Nielsen for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely take a look back into it and report.
Anything additional, Mr. Hanson? Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Anderson.
Second.
Stand adjourned. Thank you.